Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us here today. And we have Richard Grove, who, for many of you, needs no introduction. But I just recently did a deep dive into his work that has me still reeling. And I'm excited to introduce you guys to some of his work and recent work that he's doing and a new way that he's making autonomy, his premier course, more accessible in 2023. He describes himself as a forensic historian. Many of you are familiar with his work that he does with his podcasts, Grand Theft World. And then he also is the founder of the University of Reason. And then I've been doing a deep dive into his autonomy training course. And we have a new event that he wants to invite you guys to. So, Mr. Grove, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Well, Ms. Lind, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to see you again, and I look forward to this conversation. I think it's going to be inspiring and insightful and hopefully invigorating for folks at home.
I have going into your work has been a whirlwind for me. I have honestly, I feel like I've spit on my face. It's been like a vortex, just high velocity speed. You call yourself a forensic historian. Tell us a little bit about that, because there's a lot of breaking down of current events, but there's a contextualization to history and a depth of complexity that you go into that is not like anything I've ever seen. How did you become Richard Grove? Tell me a little bit about your history with study and as you've gone into history, and what inspired you to do such a depth of research that I've honestly just never come across before.
I'd say I had a healthy dose of incredulity, and that led to curiosity to answer some of those questions to which I was incredulous about statements in the world, things going on. I started out in public school. I went to university, and then I had some noble goals. I wanted to live in New York City because I grew up in Western Pennsylvania in the sticks. Grew up in the woods. So I wanted to move off to the big city and make my fortune. And George Bailey and It's a Wonderful Life, he had a goal of making $1 million by age 30. So I thought that was a good goal. So I pursued that for the first several years of my life. And I became a forensic historian later because I became a federal whistleblower. I represented myself pro se in court. That forced me to do a lot of intellectual self-defense, critical thinking, creative problem solving, rhetoric, standing up, public speaking, debate, these sort of things that goes on. And I shifted about 2003 or 2004, so almost 20 years ago. I retired from corporate world. I had a very successful career up until the point I was a whistleblower. And then I got into answering some of the bigger questions that being a whistleblower left me with about how the world works and why schooling doesn't give us a map that's accurate to the terrain, and why there are many pitfalls that should be marked on the map but are not. So I've helped people for the past 20 years with that, the aspect of adjudicating reality with their thinking about how the world actually is, and
Yeah.
call that critical thinking. Yeah.
That's extraordinary. Jordan Peterson talks about your map of meaning, and if there's a dark spot on your map that you can't explain, or there's a question that's left open, it does have the mind start to go. And you've come across in your study some incredible resources. Your treatment on the work of historian Carol Quigley and his book Tragedy and Hope, which is like 1,300 pages of devastating material that just really hooked my attention. Tell us a little bit about that project.
Well, when I was going through court, I was up against a multi-billion-dollar employer with a multi-billion-dollar international law firm that the U.S. government called when they got in trouble for, like, BCCI and Iran-Contra. They used that law firm. So I'm reading a book as I'm going through the court case. I read a lot of books. So I happened to be reading a book about J.P. Morgan, The House of Morgan by Ron Chernow. And in there, it named the law firm that I was up against in court. So I just came home from court. I'm reading this book that night, and there's the law firm. I find out where its origins were. And basically what it says is, up until this time, the JP Morgan companies had used their white glove WASP law firm of Davis, Polk, and Wardell, and they were reluctant to take over hostile corporate takeover work. So they found this law firm, Skadden Arps, Marr and Floam, who was amicable to doing hostile corporate work that the white glove WASP law firm that they traditionally use. These companies are still in business today, but they've been in business for corporate personhood kind of takeovers of internationalist and globalist efforts. But those things only go on because we all go to public school. And when we go through public school, I did very well through school. I went to university and got a degree. Those things did not amount to my success in the corporate world. Along the way, going through college, I bought into a franchise that taught me entrepreneur skills, sales skills, marketing skills, hiring, firing, all those good things. Those skills and those skills alone allowed me to rapidly rise in the corporate world. They
Mhm.
also allowed me to become a whistleblower because other people didn't have any other options. They had to shut up, take the money, keep their job. They had kids in college, these sort of things. I knew I could go make my value known in a variety of offers to the market readily. So I wasn't afraid to take those steps to preserve my integrity, which I valued more than those hefty paychecks back then. So, this idea of growing up with public schooling, we're taught through declarative sentences. We're never taught how to learn. We're not taught to pursue our interests, our curiosity, our needs, to ask questions, go out into the environment, find answers, and take actions. So, really, what I discovered was as a process of going up against these companies in court, I needed to find what is this methodology for critical thinking that we shoulda, woulda, coulda had in schooling, but we don't get. And I discovered the great books of the Western world and the history of the evolution of these ideas. But basically, what it boils down to get to the gist, is a three-step method on how to learn anything, and from which these three steps can really help you bring illustration and details to the world in your own personal way. It teaches you how to ask the questions, know what right answers look like, and then remove the contradictions in between and come to understanding and wisdom. So you do that by using your five senses. We call them common sense. We refer to it as common sense because we all have five
Yeah.
common senses. So
Yeah.
you use your five common senses. You survey the world. Now we also have the internet. So you have hyper learning, using the internet to do this meta learning, the three-step method. So how to learn anything, we can call that meta learning because you're learning about your own learning and you're specifically doing it in a methodical way that can be replicated. Now, in various industries, let me pull out my book cam here for you. In various industries, they use different lingo, right, for how they come to a conclusion. I got a graphic here for you. Let's see if this works. Let's go to this one, full page. Bring you up a little bit. There we
I'm
go.
impressed.
All right. So, hey, this is I use this all the time. It's very useful to just get the gist. When I was a kid, they had those projectors. This is like the modern day projector. So in like the scientific method, you would have observation, hypothesis, extrapolation, and then a repeatable experiment. For medicine, you'd have an examination, diagnosis, prognosis, and a treatment. In
Mhm.
philosophy, you'd have metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and aesthetics. But basically, these are individual parts, how they fit together, coming to a non-contradictory conclusion, and then taking some actions. Well, one method can allow you to speak to military people, engineering people, philosophy people, medicine-based people, scientific methods, linguistically trained people, right? So it's like a decoding system for the same process that a lot of different professions go through to make their decisions. You know, an engineer is not going to use the same vernacular as a doctor or a nurse, but you can learn how to talk to all of them. You can learn how to jump in and help them problem solve, more importantly. And then a lot of these industries, like lawyers, dentists, accountants, doctors, nurses, they go through all this schooling. They amount to all this debt. They're sent out into a marketplace where it's a rigged game against them. They aren't taught how to run a business. They're not taught how to adjudicate anything outside of their speciality, to take that which is in reality as a specific, to take it cognitively and generalize, to generalize a concept and take it out through action. This is inductive and deductive thinking. We're not taught these things in schooling. Even advanced schooling, PhDs aren't getting this type of education. So these are the essences of, let's call it, old world learning. Up until the 20th century, these things were well known. America was one of the highest literacy rate countries in world history. And then we had a system of schooling come in called the Prussian education program, and it took everything from education to indoctrination for
Mhm.
purposes of propagandizing us on behalf of various powerful entities, the state and corporations, basically. And now understanding how it's broken through books like I got Deliberate Dumbing Down of America by Charlotte Iserby, who worked in the Reagan administration.
Incredible. You were able to interview her before her death. That was an incredible interview that you did.
She's a fantastic treasure trove of information. She passed away, I think, almost a year ago, but this is a 700-page book. Most people don't have time to internalize this whole thing. So she's telling you there's the problem, but the solution's not in here. I have all of John Taylor Gatto's books. I worked with him very closely up until his death. He tells you about the problem, but he's not giving you the solutions. So I was
Can we go
fortunate.
back just
Go ahead.
real quick to
For
the
sure.
context and the problems? Because you're starting to
Yeah.
get into solutions, and
Oh, yeah.
a
You're
lot of
right.
people sell solutions. And I myself have taken, followed a lot of influencers. So Brendan Bouchard or Michael Hyatt has Best Year Ever. There's all these New Year's training workshops. I've actually
Mhm.
put out one of my own, read 30 to 50 books in preparation for it, spent $50,000 on courses to see what other people were doing. And what uniquely captured my attention, with your materials on tools and solutions and training people in this old world education, how to think and not what to think, was that you actually were on this a long time ago. Whereas a lot of people, particularly in the medical profession, are just now starting to have questions after 2020. You were analyzing the fact that pharmaceutical companies were tied in with textbook writers. And in your program, I'm watching the flipping open of elementary school textbooks and the type of phonics training that they're giving children. And the revelation that these textbooks from when we were very young are actually written by the pharmaceutical companies was astounding to me. And I really appreciated the in textbook, literally looking at the pages and what they're saying. That was revolutionary for me. So a lot of people are starting to have questions like the CDC is changing its own standards for death. So you could die with COVID and in a car crash. The CDC changed its own standards without protocol, its own standards that it written 19 years ago. So several people who have a lot of trust in our three-letter institutions are just starting to have questions after years of this rigorous training of this new world education of protocols, and we're trained in medicine to, to do the protocols that have the scientific backing and the data and the science behind it. A lot of us are just starting to have questions. You've been on this trail for quite a long time, and we're so incensed about what is going on that you were first to market with a lot of these new innovative solutions. And it's actually your understanding of history, your ability to describe the problem that built so much trust in the solutions that you propose, which handle an incredible amount of complexity while actually just being very simple, but just really what you need, the ability, a lot of what you're explaining here.
Yeah, the gist of one of the skill sets that I've built for myself over the past 20 years is to take exceedingly dense and copious and comprehensive data and simplify it and distill it without losing its essence.
Mhm.
For the purpose not of getting people to believe that distillation, but having enough interest to schedule their time, attention, and energy to go look at the bigger thing. And I
Yeah.
think that's lost on a lot of people. There's a lot of
Or you,
paraphrased quotes out there floating, and people were like, "This is not a real quote." And I said, "I have the first edition of that book. It's an 8-page quote. Somebody paraphrased it. You should go read the book for yourself
yeah.
and
Wow.
look." So I got into a lot of the predicaments of naivete that led to complexities in my life because I believed authority without hesitation. I believed the experts. I played my part in the system. And when I found out the system doesn't really work like that in reality, it's
Yeah.
different than advertised. Then I had to learn how to step up, do a critical examination. And what I did was I said, these major institutions that surround me in our society, what's the history and evolution of these groups? How did we get allopathic Rockefeller branded medicine? So I read books. So I read The History of the Rockefeller Foundation by Raymond Fosdick, who was the president of the Rockefeller Foundation. And in there, you can see how not only did they set up the General Education Board, so education, and medical schools, AMA, these sort of things, but they also set up everything in China that we know today, COVID land. That started in the 1920s with Rockefeller setting up the entire establishment as a model. They funded Mao Zedong. There's a whole bunch of interesting history with the robber barons and the other power players that are non-elected rulers in our society and very well documented since C. Wright Mills's The Power Elite in 1956.
You have a profound understanding of who a lot of the key players are, and what their plans for us include, which is not robust enough really to be worthy of the complexity and the weight and value of a human soul. And so you teach people how to, I mean, they want you to buy their medical degrees and to go $250,000 into debt. And now we have legislation in California that if between a private doctor and patient, you say something that's against, state regulations, that they will come after your medical license. And so I think a lot of people have gone through their protocols. They've been spit out on the other side and are realizing that these big institutions' plan for their life aren't quite as promised. And they need to a little bit chart, not a little bit, they need to chart their own path if they want to end up somewhere else significant. And you actually teach people the mindset and the skill set to have a more holistic pursuit that's worthy of what the human mind and soul is really capable of.
What I try to teach people, and it's been very effective over the past 4 years, is how to write your own script in life.
Yeah,
You have to, instead of being a unwitting character in someone else's script, you need to lead
exactly.
an examined life, which results at you being the helmsman of your own ship and steering and navigating. And you said a key word, soul. The people that have plans for our future that are very dystopian, I mean, we could get into all that stuff. It's you don't need to know about that. What you need to know is that the obedience to authority that comes without thinking critically, let's call it assumption. Assumption is the major foundational root cause that allows all these other symptoms to manifest. So
Mm.
instead of assuming what authority says, let's verify, then trust. Let's make sure it's true. Then trust over time is built by them doing that consistently. And that's integrity. So whether they're telling us the truth or we can find the truth for ourselves, now it makes no difference. Now we can take every piece of data and compare it to our body of knowledge plus what's available now. And that can change over time. But learning how to think for ourselves starts as a human consciousness. There's a quote, liberty is a soul's right to breathe. And when when the laws are girded too tight, liberty becomes a syncope. It passes out, right? This is a famous quote from Good Will Hunting. You heard it in the movie, but it was Proverbs from the Plymouth Pulpit by Henry Ward Beecher. It's a very famous quote from back in the day. These days, censorship and these laws have gotten girded so tight that freedom is about to pass out, and that's their goal. They don't have freedom in their future. They don't have parents in their future. There's a whole bunch of things, these dystopian great reset activists out there controlling the world with ESG and carbon credits, all this other stuff that's coming down, precipitating on business owners who are unaware of these machinations of a globalist nature that are very real. They're about to take on 2023 with a storm. They want to change over the money system. So we can worry about all these things that we can't control. I'm a stoicist. Let's not worry about the things we can't control. Let's take care of what we can control. What's between our ears? How we're meeting and greeting the reality every day. Do we have an attitude of gratitude? Do we have the resilience and the robustness to meet the day's challenges with a smile and a plan of action and the resources to get her done? Because that's all that matters.
Mm.
Preserving our way of life, our families, our communities into
Yeah.
the future parallel to what they're trying to do out there. And then when something has to interact between those two, you know how to communicate to people on a common level, to form large groups, and to have strength in numbers. Because otherwise, history says you're going to be a statistic. So learning how to do these things is it triggers some people's complexity. They're in an area of comfort. They're eating chips and watching Netflix. They might need to catch up on some of this learning to embolden their future, especially if you want to have a future where you own something and you are happy, not because they took away all your rights and you're not allowed to be unhappy anymore.
You will own nothing and you will be happy.
That is literally
Their
their plan.
commercial.
You'll
I
own
know.
nothing and like it. And I think it's not a good plan, but their plan has momentum, funding, approval from on high. It's going to happen without strategic resistance. Well, strategic resistance starts between your ears with being a little incredulous of, there's 1,500 schools in Australia that are feeding kids bugs now. Parents aren't getting informed consent. And there are things and insects that are not meant to go inside of human beings and react in medical ways, right? So there's these things that are untested but trendy, and you see it in Canada. I mean, it's a thing. Cricket flour, all these sort of things, cricket beer. They're making a move to change the attitudes, values, behaviors, and beliefs of everybody on the planet. That's exactly what Charlotte Iserbyt said in Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. She said it started in 1934 with the Carnegie Blue Book. And sure enough, if you check into these nonprofit foundations, Rockefeller, Ford, Carnegie, whole bunch of other ones, They are anti-American. They have an internationalist goal. They're very proud to proclaim it in writing. It's known. The Congress did a committee called the Reese Committee in 1955. They found this out. It's a known. It's been going on my entire lifetime and prior to that without much resistance. And it didn't mean much as long as we could fill our car with gas and send our kids to school and everyone gets jobs and we have food on the table. But the pandemic changed all that. They said, oh, are you an approved list to stay open? Then your business is done.
Mm.
And if people don't have a way to make their offer, a lot of businesses transitioned online. A lot of yoga instructors, people who were doing stuff in person, learned how to make digital courses and start getting their value out online. Some of them actually 10x their businesses by doing that, because now you're not just dealing with local people. So in some ways, those ready to adapt, evolve, and overcome and see the opportunity, see the pandemic as the opportunity to survive and thrive. You got to turn on your turbo boost now. You got to get your critical thinking on. You're going to have to put some things on your calendar and have some meetings this year to actually stay ahead of this big wave. I look at it not as like this big wave coming at it. I think of it as big wave surfing. Don't be a victim to the wave. Get on the wave and use the wave. These people want to go out and say a bunch of things that are not true and take away people's individual rights and take away their. Then let's learn about what are our rights. How do we articulate and defend them and stand our ground?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that lost their jobs because of the pandemic because, well, they lose jobs because of the pandemic, or they were threatened to lose their job if they didn't take a shot. I didn't have any students that had to take that shot to keep their job. I had a lot of students keep their job though, because I said, go find 10 other people with your opinion. Here's how you structure yourself to push back. I'm gonna have to
Mm.
decline that. That's how they get structured, to be able to withstand it. Otherwise, they get picked off one by one. They don't have
Yeah.
the opportunity to keep their job, keep all that good work that they've done, keep their future, keep their family fed. And they also don't have to take the experimental gene therapy which was brought to us by DARPA and Moderna 2013. And if you go to Moderna's SEC filings and search gene therapy, there's 23 to 27 reference, depending on singular or plural. It's all right in front of us. But people believe what they're told on TV in a repeated manner, which is
In a
psychological
repetitive
warfare.
manner.
So
And
it's,
it starts as early as elementary school. I think your work
yeah,
really opened my eyes to ways that I had been affected and ways that my thinking had been affected that I wasn't aware of. And when you teach people how to have a no excuse culture of excellence, how to be self-determining, and the skills and the mindset to really do that. Um, I am really paying attention to your work because whereas a lot of people started to have questions with institutions that we've trusted just in the past 2 to 3 years, you've been alert to this for a long time. You've already gone through your shock and horror phase.
yeah.
You've tried to figure out how to get people off of the highway to nowhere that's been arranged for us. The plan that you play in the globalist agenda is, a bug eating, in debt, mindless consumer. Those are the ways that you're useful to them, which is not something a father or a mother would ever want for their child, which is why the removal of parents and the institutional nature of children and extending childhood is all useful to them. But can you just tell me, how are so you've been through, you're way ahead of people. You started now helping a lot of people and have already been for years coming up with solutions on the most important steps that people can take to transition to a more autonomous, self-directed society. What are those, and what is the new offering that you have that people can participate this year?
Well, classically, uh, a piece of my work that everyone found to be like the Rosetta Stone was my Peace Revolution podcast, episode 23, called How to Free Your Mind. And then there, I explicitly taught the trivium method of creative problem solving and critical thinking. So that was good. And then in that same series, I had an episode called Parrhesia, and it was a need for a comprehensive conscious curriculum. So to go back and close that open loop on the soul, the people who designed the philosophy behind the Great Reset, the people who designed the Prussian education system, which we know today as people who have PhDs, are part of that Wundtian heritage, because Wilhelm Wundt created the first PhD, and everyone got their PhDs, if you trace it back, from Wilhelm Wundt. He believed that human beings have no soul and that they could be manipulated like mechanical, like clockwork oranges. And once you get people to assume, they do that. So you can be trained as Pavlov, Skinner, operant conditioning when you're assuming. But intellectual self-defense says, I hear your stimulus, but I'm going to think about that and give you a thoughtful response. That space in between stimulus and reaction, let's put that space in there. Let's have incredulity, some critical thinking, and that gives you your freedom back. So
Mhm.
they've tried MK Ultra projects, controlling the mind, all these things, wires, Neuralink, whatever. If they can get people to assume, they're as trainable as pigeons that can learn to read, peck, and turn. Those were some of the experiments back in the day that made it look like animals could read, but they're just operant conditioned stimuli, functionary objects. So really, it's our chance to take our consciousness back. Aristotle said your soul is your consciousness capacity for thinking. Having thoughts is not thinking. Asking questions, finding answers is that's actual thinking. It's not hard. It's what our brains are made to do. You have the most complex organism in the known universe between your ears. It's a quantum computer yet to be ever replicated on this planet with silicon. That's why they want transhumanism, by the way. They're like, hey, how can we
Mhm.
function this thing at a higher level? Well, I'm learning over the past 20 years how to self-direct. I'm not looking for Elon Musk or Kurzweil or one of these singularity people or DeGrasse Tyson to be telling me what to do. I would like to interact with this reality as I please, as I see fit, as long as I don't take away anyone else's freedom and I learn how to defend myself physically and mentally, I can interact as I please freely and happily and joyfully and pleasantly and kindly and politely without a hassle.
Mhm.
So learning how to have a positive mindset gets you into the problem solving mode because we cannot solve these problems in a negative mindset. So I stay away from black pill people. I stay away from people who are always complaining and never trying to resolve or take my, if you're going to complain, I'm going to offer a solution. And if you keep doing the same thing and don't take the solutions, I'm going to stop communicating. So learning how to tune into the signal and tune out the noise, learn a few easy methods, learn how to stop wearing all these hats for all these jobs, learn how to identify and delegate and systematize. And then we can really grow and thrive and be the greater reset. They started it. We're going to finish it. And we're peaceful. We know we can't raise up arms against our oppressor, but I'm going to look at, Stephen Biko, the leader of the Black consciousness movement, his observation that the greatest weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And how does that go on? People assume. So what can I do when people assume around me? I don't say you're stupid and here's the facts. I ask a question. And usually I split. They've got the question, they'll start thinking if they're meant to think. It's like planting seeds. Not all seeds are going to fall on fallow ground. Some will sprout, and those are the ones we care about. So, Johnny Appleseed for the consciousness movement, something like that. That's on my resume.
I love that. I love that. So tell us a little bit more specifically. You have autonomy that teaches people the origins of a lot of the problems that we're having. You literally open up children's textbooks and go into the pages and go into really deep stuff. You have taken up all of my time over Christmas and all of my road trips and my holiday plans with doing deep dives into the things that you just mentioned, and then I'm off on a rabbit trail. But then you really get into some of these skills, and I think for a lot of medical professionals, we're really profoundly transitioning from a education. You have a certificate. That certificate, right to practice, can be taken away at any time. I know that you're really passionate, not just about teaching people how to think differently, which in the medical practice, people are taught like the old cart method, how to go into any medical emergency and assess what's going on. So you teach a methodology of problem assessment and coming to solution, diagnosis, prognosis, and you're really you teach a lot of entrepreneurial skills. Now, all of that is locked inside of autonomy, which is a 2 time a year. I can't wait for the next one that's coming up that you teach. But you're making all of that a little bit more accessible for people to get to know you better and to get to know the things that you're teaching. Tell us about the upcoming offer that you have that's coming out this week.
Yeah, I'm in between teaching autonomy. So I'm on a 7-week respite right now where I do more work than I do at any other point in the year. So it's not really rest in between. The twice a year course I designed, remember the comprehensive conscious curriculum, which was a good idea. I was expecting somebody else to do. Well, I collected a couple thousand note cards over 10 years and it came time to, hey, let's offer this to the public. And I figured if I had 10 people who were interested, it would
Mm,
be something I would invest my time into. And I think, we had like 10x interest, and
yeah.
then I really had to step it up. And then it's been 4 years that seems like, have gone by like this, teaching twice a year. It's a heavy duty training course for people who are serious about themselves. It's going to be a set of skills that you use for the rest of your life. You're going to use most of these skills every day, and you're going to wish you had them every day, since you were in high school, but they didn't give them to you. And no university on the planet or private school is offering anything like this. So it's a unique training course that starts out with participants who qualify themselves via an obstacle course. Because if you don't have an attention span to finish the obstacle course, you're not gonna it's gonna be like a tidal wave and you've got a straw. You're not good chance. But if you can make it through the obstacle course and you can rededicate some of your lower priority time during the week, you can get these amazing results. And so what we first learn how to do is get away from the learned helplessness, the mindset of scarcity, all these negative mental things between our ears holding us back. And then I teach sales, which is a high value problem solving skill set. It's nothing
Hold on. I
cringeworthy. Yeah,
have to
sorry,
back
go
you
ahead.
up.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
have to back you up just for a second because when you opened and said the tool set and the mindset that we have doesn't match the terrain.
Yeah. You're set up for failure.
The
And you're not
second
going to, the system is designed to deliver for its needs, not yours. It
exactly.
develops people who don't think, who assume, who trust obediently through our authority and lets national security run amok while the rest of the world gets sullied in our name. So it's time to take things back, starting with our thoughts between our ears. You have negative self-talk from parents, teachers, all these people from 30, 40 years ago, if you're older like me, that, could ring around in your head unless you say, oh, I hear that. And I dismiss that as arbitrary. That is not relevant to right now, right? So learning how to get in control. I heard somebody yesterday call themselves a name. I'm like, they said it out loud so I could hear it. Like, if you said it out loud, I bet you say that to yourself 100 times a day like that. Don't do that. There is no benefit. So I encourage people to put down beliefs that they have that do not benefit them. And let's focus for 12 weeks just on you growing and making these milestone breakthroughs. So alongside the curriculum, which goes through kind of like the unindoctrination part, the sales, the marketing, the tech stack for entrepreneurs, the executive skills, the consulting skills, the webinar skills, all the things you need for today's market are backed up by integration exercises where every couple of weeks you're learning a new interpersonal skill set. And this is how you bond and make networked communication in the community. You actually have a class of people. Usually we limit it around 100. You have a class of people that you go through with 12 weeks. You get to know each other very well because the first exercise is how to do the meet and greet. So How to Meet Friends and Influence People is a famous book. You need to also know how to meet people and not necessarily be influential, but just how to be an excellent conversationalist. And from that, we teach the interview skill set. And it's a methodology that anybody can learn. I've had severe introverts go through my course. Most of my course is introverts. These are people they have the thinking, they have the cerebral consciousness nature, but they need to become more smooth in their presentation, especially these days on video and Zoom, these sort of things. So we put the students through exercises. Now, I've had students go out from that exercise and interview people like James Corbett, and that same student then went and interviewed John McAfee right before he passed away. So I've seen people just take that interview skill set from the first couple of weeks and run with it. But if you have the sales skill set, it's the same skill set that I learned when I was in college from that franchise. I invested $5,000 in myself. I went through a training program, and then I had my own business, and I was cranking out money every summer while my other friends were like doing nothing. And that prepared me for the future. And I used that exact skill set to earn $1 million before I was 30 in New York City in the high tech game. So being able to transition that skill to other people in just a couple weeks inside of this 12-week course is like, it's game changer each layer you go through the course. So you get students in the first couple weeks and they're like, this totally pays for itself. I'm like, you haven't even learned how to make the course pay for itself. And that's built into the course too. So all of that, it goes very well. It's very a drama-free zone, a fear-free zone of mutual exploration and growth. And it's highly interpersonal and dynamic, which you can't get from watching YouTube influencers. So, and it's a lifetime membership. So all that's great, but it's a high wall for people to get in. It's for serious people because it's a 120 to 150 hour investment of my time, right? So I wanted to lower the barrier to entry, and I wanted to put something free out there that is super valuable, that actually primes people should they want to go to autonomy later. This is the mindset and stuff you don't have time to work out later. Like, these are the things you have to do before you go to the training camp. you're going to learn some martial art. These are martial arts of the intellectual self-defense variety. So you want to know how to like put your gi on or your kimono, whatever the thing is you wear in your mental metaphor that I just made up, and you want to come prepared. And that way you don't quit on yourself during the learning curve. Because anytime we get out of our comfort zone, it's going to be ambiguous and awkward and triggering our complexity. I just prepare students for that. I teach them how to surf over the overwhelm and decision fatigue and all these other things. Once you learn how to learn anything, you could go off in a lot of directions. How do you actually get your goals out of that? Because now you got a bigger menu of things you can do. You could go live anywhere and do anything. Now start choosing. If you want to do this thing, what are the steps that lead to it successfully? Who are you going to need? What resources? All these thoughtful things you need to get to that goal. If it's a doctor who needs more business or needs to restructure that, let's start with, what is your offer to the world? Do you need a license? Do you need a partnership? Do you need this practice? Do you need this subscription? Or can you go over here like this person, this person, this person have, and start working with them? I know one of the first people I interviewed during COVID, because I was heavy into researching before it even became a thing, Dr. Peter McCullough. And now he's got a whole new insurance company for those of us who did not participate in their $1 billion offer that was repeated and peer pressured into everyone else. Now we have options. So I like to help people who think they're at this impasse where they can't go any further and say, oh, that's a good
Find that
challenge.
third
Yeah.
option or fourth
Yeah.
option, to think innovatively, to structure a dream that would really compel all of them. You don't even know what you're capable of until there's that motivation that you've crystallized something that you're like, I really, really would want that. And a lot of people feel like they don't have a lot of great options at this point. We're at a point where it's like there's no good options, but I feel like the way that you train people to think about what they would like to have if they could really go for it is innovative. And so I love that you're starting with this goals training. It's a workshop, which is
It's a two-part event. So
yeah.
the first hour is going to be a lecture that's going to be free for everybody. So there's hundreds of thousands, there's a lot of people coming for the free part. And they'll get an example of what I do for autonomy students on a weekly basis for 5 or 6 hours on a Friday night live, right? So they'll get a good taste of that. For people who can afford $47 and think they're worth that much, they're going to go to the workshop. That's going to be 2 hours. It's going to have a whole bunch of autonomy graduates and executives that are going to go one-on-one and make sure all the people have an idea of something they're striving toward and have some methodical formulation that they can then pursue throughout the year. So we'll have examples and use cases and interactive and question and answer, all the things I do normally for autonomy students and graduates. I'm going to do that in a micro version on a Sunday afternoon because I just graduated all the season 8 students and I now have an open time slot this Sunday. So we thought that'd be the best way to extend an olive branch to so many people who have been tried and tested by the pandemic and have survived and still have the willingness to learn and grow forward. 2023 can be the best year yet.
Well, thank you so much for this offering. Like I said, I've been through a lot of like Todd Herman's 90-day year. My birthday happens to be exactly 90 days after January 1st. So I've been through all the programs, and I just want to encourage you guys, if you have been inspired by anything that Grove has said, I just want to encourage you to come. This is a situation, the title, and it sounds a little bit like a lot of other things out there, but Grove is not like a lot of other people out there. I almost feel I had like this anger, like I found myself like walking around mad for days, and I was trying to figure out what it was. And I have a daughter who's 13, and for years I was using all of this makeup and spending a lot of money on makeup. And then she showed me this like new concealer and this new mascara, and I was just mad for weeks. I'm like, I can't believe anybody would put this other stuff out, like this other mascara doesn't do what mascara is obviously meant to do. And I had such an upgrade in makeup, and I was like upset that this other stuff was even on the market. I was like, this other stuff is total crap and doesn't do what it's supposed to do at all. You know what I mean? This is nothing like what this new stuff is that my 13-year-old showed me, like, oh, well, you should use this brand. Well, this foundation is way better. And I'm like, thank you. This is what foundation is supposed to do. My other foundation is, I'm upset it's even being sold. It's terrible.
See,
You know
that
what I
sounds like a little entropy in your system right there. Because
Oh no,
Uh,
am I going in and out?
no. I meant just in like you getting upset before you made the evolutionary jump because I teach an anti-fragile mindset. So you immediately take that feedback and say thank you. It had been a long time before I discovered that. You save yourself all that energy that you just were expressing and like
Okay. Yeah, I
the
did just
frustrations,
rearrange my
like the
energy
meeting of
right
these
now.
contradictions and learning how to
Yeah.
resolve it gets you back on point to be like, thank you. Where can we get some? Let's move to the next step. And
Yeah.
success is all about speed. So learning how to shift out of first by getting rid of those things that are kind of like the drag, and then it allows you to get more done with the same or less amount of energy. And this is where a lot of people think they can't improve because they're doing as much as they can and they've already hit the wall. Well, you got to shift out
Yeah.
of first gear. You're about to redline. Everybody knows what happens when you redline your car. Engine stops. So shift out of first. That's all.
Yeah, well, I did just have an incredible energy burst because I feel like I've been through other programs, and then when you find one that's extraordinary, you're like, wait a minute, this other stuff was, falsely advertised or a waste of my time. And, it's like all the concealers advertise the same way, and they all say that they do the same thing. They do not. There's concealers that I found that do what concealers should do. And that's how I feel about your work, is like, wow, I feel so thankful that I've come across someone who is so has a level of complexity that actually matches the terrain that I find myself in, because I work with a lot of top level thinkers, entrepreneurials, influencers, people in key decision-making processes, and they are struggling with a lot of the things that you talk about. Overwhelm, processing high levels of information, trying to figure out where to focus, what opportunities to take. And so I'm just incredibly, I'll shift out of anger of not having found you in the past and just shift into gratitude. This sounds like other things on the market. It is not. I'm going to be there. I'm telling everyone I know about this. Thank you so much for the invitation. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we close out?
No, that I think that you've covered the gist, and I want to take half the responsibility for that situation. So I'm going to say that in these situations, you came across my work recently. I was not marketing myself for the past 20 years. I was trying to maintain a low profile. I was plenty successful. I didn't need to go pushing out into the rest of the markets. But with the pandemic and everything, I realized that there's so many more people that are entitled to at least, hey, get the three skills of creative problem solving, get the three-step method. I give it away for free to people to just say, get a start. So you're not assuming your way forward, not assuming away your wealth in the future and your future generations by saying, I trust the CDC, the FDA, all these other groups. We now need to kind of think for ourselves more than ever. And all the freedoms that we've lost in the interim while we were assuming can be rapidly regained once we turn on our consciousness. Once we start to communicate cogently and clearly with others, we can get back our freedoms and defend them so we can attain, maintain, and retain freedom. And that's the whole name of the game. You can't have entrepreneurism or excellent executives without these elements of freedom.
I love it. And in medical training, there's some training textbooks that will have a symptom set or condition, and they'll say, if you have high blood pressure, prescribe this. So you have a one-to-one stable relationship. And if you are educated that way, you are thoroughly prepared for a limited number of conditions or, issues. And you are completely unprepared for anything outside of that. And we need an innovation in learning how to think and learning how to assess that prepares us for these novel medical technologies, for the novel things in a very rapidly evolving space. So the fact that you've matched the skills and mindsets to the actual terrain that we find ourselves in is so useful. I'm so thankful that I found you, and I'm really looking forward to your workshop. Thank you for being with us here tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. This is a blast, and I'll see you Sunday.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
All right, peace.
Is there something you really want to do in 2023, but you're not quite sure how to make it happen? And join us for the Autonomy Mindset and Goal Setting Workshop. This is the perfect event for you if you want to take control of your life and achieve your goals. You'll be guided through the process of goal setting and learn how to create achievable goals and develop a positive mindset. Our experienced team of autonomy students will be on hand to help you identify your strengths and weaknesses and equip you with the skills and tools you need to live big in 2023. Join us for a fantastic day of community, inspiration, and personal growth. You'll leave feeling empowered and motivated, ready to take on the world. The event will be held on Sunday, January 15th. Register early so you can secure your spot. We look forward to seeing you at the Autonomy Mindset and Goal Setting Workshop.